Yeah, I'll be on in a couple of seconds. I'm just cleaning up a little. Just having a little camera trouble. Give me a second here to see if I can get it up. So I'll bring you over to the desktop while I'm fixing the camera. But apparently there's some interesting bugs we came across, and I'll bring it over to the desktop so you can see it. Hang on a second. There we go. So this person had an issue where their temperature wouldn't work. And so essentially what they were saying was the moment it starts, it turns off. So in order to actually fix the problem, I said, hey, send me the file, I'll give it a try. So when I gave it a try, apparently the issue occurred on my system. So I'll go you through the thought process in just a second. I just have to set the camera so it doesn't turn off right away. And hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm seeing. So let me put the camera back in place here. Apparently it doesn't want to go back into place, so hopefully it will now. Now I might have to set it real quick. Let me check it. But essentially the issue that was occurring, interesting. My camera keeps opening up, so give me a second here to adjust it. Sorry about this, guys. Normally this doesn't happen during stream. But, okay. Now I got the camera up. Let me clean up the desk a little from the mess and get things out of the way. And you can see the camera is on the table. So essentially what was going on was the error actually moved over to my system. Hang on, I gotta fix the camera again. Let me bring it back over to the desktop, and hopefully this will be the last time I have to fix it, or I'll have to swap cameras. So what was occurring in this person's case showed up on my system as well. So when that happened, essentially the problem was both of ours. So I was curious as to what the issue was, so I'm going to take you through the thought process in 2 seconds here, now that I have the camera working again. So there's an issue with the camera power every once in a while where it goes out on me, and essentially it causes wonderful stream issues. But here is the actual board. Let me change the lighting a little. So he was working with the, I believe, SKR 1.2. And so what we discovered was I had the same issue. So I'm going to recreate the problem based on what we see over on the desktop over here. So you can try this if you have the same configuration, but essentially I downloaded both of these just before we started. And now we're going to try it out. So I'm going to go over to the desktop in just a second. I just have to make sure that I can see it for the computer. Okay, so over here we have both these files. I've downloaded a new copy of Marlin and extracted it. So here's his config. Let's double check the board real quick. So you can see that it's actually the Big Tree Tech SKR version 2. So I need to pull this board out for a second and find the right board, because I thought it was the other one. So here's the Big Tree Tech. Now there's 2 versions of this board, and I'll show you one of them first. This right here is the Big Tree Tech. Let me see if I can zoom in. So the chipset on this is actually STM32F49. So we had the exact same systems. So what I had to do was replicate his problem. So I'm going to replicate it in front of you so you can see what's occurring. So the first thing I'm going to do, just for safety, is to secure the board to the table so it doesn't slide around on us. So to do this, I put a little putty on the bottom, and this prevents it from sliding all over the place on me. And I'll zoom in so you can actually see better. And I may have to adjust the focus a little because I've been moving the camera around. Okay, so here's the board. Essentially, these are the output power sources. This is the input power source. So first thing that I'm going to have an issue with is I have to change these out. So I'll show you this process somewhat. So I'm going to take the power supply in a second and just place it over the board. And you can see that it's 24 volts. And I'm going to have to pop out the power. So what I'm going to have to do is find my screwdriver and hopefully not bang into the camera while I do this, otherwise it's going to be interesting again. And I have to take these out because I have different connectors for this particular one. So now that these are out, I have to grab the right one. And if you guys haven't noticed, well, you can't see this part, I have now drawers behind me where I can grab equipment. So essentially, this one has ferrule connectors. That's why I wanted it. So I, down here, have voltage on one side, ground on the other, so it's V plus and V minus. So I'm going to slide this one in here and tighten it down. Now this may vary by country, not this part, but the actual power part. So let me tighten that real good. Over here, the power in the US is different because we have grounds, and we also have a different actual speed for the refresh, or I'm not explaining that part well, but it's 60 in the US and it's 50 in Europe, so there's a switch on the side of here that will set that for you. So I'm going to place this off to the side. I'm then going to pop this out because it comes out on this board. And if you haven't noticed, there's a little screw on top that loosens this right here and it opens them up. So you just turn left or counterclockwise. And then as you can see, it's marked red on one side, so I'm going to slide that in. And then I'm going to tighten it down like so. So that's in there nice and tight. The ferrule connection gives you a good connection and a safe one. And I'm going to do the same over here. And then I'm going to tighten this down. It's hard to do in midair while you're streaming. So then I'm just going to place it in here. And this is actually not the right place to place it, and I'm pretty sure someone's screaming in the chat as I do it. I just realized what I did wrong, and good thing I didn't power the system up, or else you'd get to see actual smoke coming out of the board. We're going to double check, but the power is over here. So pardon my goofiness sometimes, but we're going to have to go over to the browser, and I'll check on the chat in a second. So inside the browser, we're going to have to find the SKR2. So under repositories, we'll go to SKR2. We don't see it, so we'll do _2 or -2. And here's the board. So we'll pull up the hardware, we'll find the pins file. And inside the pins file, you can see bed powers here and then DC in. So it's ground on the left. And then it's voltage on the right, either 12 or 24. I'm going to be working with 24 today. So let's go back over to the desktop. And let me look in the chat while I'm at it. Okay, we got a couple people in here. Hey, Marcella. So essentially, I got to hook up the power over here. But the good thing about me showing you the screw up is that you're not going to be able to see this part because it's actually on the board. But you can see that we have voltage here, ground here. So I'm going to have to feel around for this. And I think I'm in the right place, but I can tell by tightening this down. If it doesn't pull out, that means I'm in the right place. So I'm going to tighten that one down, and now they're both secure. So we're not going to be actually using a stepper, but just power to here for the actual connection for our extruder. So I'm going to grab an extruder. Hopefully I have some on hand. This should be a known good one, or at least that's what I thought. So we're going to assume it's known good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on some weights, just so that it's not directly on the table. And I'm going to populate this, and in this case voltage doesn't matter. So we're just going to slide it into both sides and tighten it down. And hopefully I unscrewed them, and it looks like I did. Okay, so that's all good. So we're going to plug that in. Now what we need to do is we need to check where this goes, because there's lots of thermistors down here for sensing. So we'll go back over to the pinout diagram. And if you look over here, you have TB, which is thermal bed. Then you have TH0, which is thermal hot end 0. Then you have TH1, which is thermal hot end 1. So now that we know that, we know there's one before that that says PS on in that row of 4 here, and it's also written on the silk screen for the board. So it's the third one over. So let's go back over to the board. We're going to take the thermistor and we're going to count over 1, 2, 3 and just plug it in, because there's no positive or negative, and we're going to make sure that's seated as best as possible, because this is usually where an error occurs. Then we're going to pop out the drive. We're going to make sure that we're in the actual connection for USB. So that's the jumper over here. So I'm going to move this over to here for the moment so that we can load firmware with power off USB. So let me find the cord real quick and I'll show you what I'm talking about. If I plug this in, it powers the board. If I unplug this and I move this over, then it's going to run off of actual voltage from the PSU or power supply. So you won't hear anything when it's connected. So I just do that to load firmware. That's just my habit, and also to show you how that functions. But I'm going to weight this down for safety. Now we technically don't care about the hot end, but I'm going to keep it in frame so you can see it. And I'm going to put a weight here so that these cords don't pop up everywhere. Now I'm going to take this and populate the actual USB and plug this into the computer. And this is where it gets weird. So on his setup, when I was over here on my desktop, I figured I'd just load his setup. So I went over to VS Code, and what I had to do was actually set it up in here. So we have the 2 files that I downloaded, then we have our Marlin over in here, and his files will go in this folder. So if we go back to downloads, and we highlight both of these, right click and do a copy, then go to Marlin, second Marlin, and then inside this Marlin folder, we're going to paste over what we currently have. So now we have his configuration. So we're going to go back over to VS Code. We're going to click on Explorer, Open Folder, go to the Downloads folder, the first Marlin folder, second Marlin folder, and then select folder. So this is his configuration. So what we're going to do now is check to see which type of motherboard it is, because I didn't ask for the platform I/O, but I asked him over chat if it was 429 or the other one for STM32F429. So if you guys don't know this, you can find out what the actual board processors are by going to sourcecoreboards.h. search on SKR. I think it's _2. Oh, that doesn't work. It's V2 maybe. There we go. And it's always the B version in this case because the A version doesn't work. But as you've noticed over here, there's two different STMs. There's a 407 and there's a 429. So I'm going to close out of here because I already know that it's going to be for platform io.ini. We need to change this. So to change this, I'm going to minimize this so you can see better. Go to the ini folder, and I'm going to find the file stm32f4. Then I'm going to search on SKR, and I think it's _2 in this case. So they tell you what processor. This is 407. So we need the 429, which is down here. So I'm going to copy that. Then I'm going to minimize this, go back over to platform IO, paste this in. Then I'm going to do a clean, and then I'm going to do a build. Now, like I say always, if it fails on the first time, hit the checkbox a second time because something might build out of order. If that is the case, and it does fail on the second time, find the very first error in red and correct it, because the ones after that are a cascade of errors due to the first, usually. So, now that this is almost built, we're going to go over to the .pio folder in the build folder over here for 429, and we'll wait for it to actually appear. There may be a couple other things that need to build first. So this folder may populate some more. So let me get the mouse out of the way so you can see what's going on. There should be a firmware firmware.elf, then we'll see ours. So we'll right click on that. Then we'll go to Reveal in File Explorer. Now we already have something on the D drive from the previous build. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to send it to the D drive. So now it's here. So we'll go back over to the actual workbench, pop out the drive, pop it into here, plug it in, let the firmware flash. It should ding. There it goes. So now it's loaded. So we'll move the jumper over here to the direct power. And then we'll test it with the USB. And that looks good. So now we'll energize the system with voltage from the PSU. So all we're doing to test this now is we're going to actually go over to Pronterface in a second. But I have to clean up the desktop here so you can see it correctly. And essentially I'm opening up Pronterface, and it's probably going to see the USB in this case, but let's check. So let's bring it up here. So over here you can see that it's COM port 1. Now we have 2 COM ports showing in addition to that. So we don't know which one it is, either 5 or 19. So what we'll do is this. We'll go to the desktop for a second. We'll type Device Manager. We'll bring this up. And it always pops up on the wrong screen. We'll click here and it's 5. 1 is always the default for the computer. So we can eliminate 50% of the choices. We'll connect. And so now we're connected. Now I'm just testing this. So I'm going to set this to 60 degrees. And the cool thing here is all you have to do is go over and change it to 60 degrees Celsius and then click on Set. And what will happen over here is it'll show the charting of the actual power. So I click here, it goes on, it's saying set the power to here, so you should see this line in blue rise up to this line. If it does not, then something's wrong. So it could be a power issue, but obviously we're not seeing anything occur. So any second now it should fail, which it did. So this is a good thing that it failed, although it doesn't seem that way whenever you're in this situation. But it means one of several things. So I'll show you what the first couple of things are that it could be. So if I go back over to the workbench for a second, and I de-energize the system by removing the power, I can test a couple of things. So first of all, we could try continuity. So continuity means that the wire is solid all the way through, meaning that it travels with a current. So we need to grab a multimeter. So let me get one real quick here. So here is the multimeter. I'll zoom out so you can see better. And what we're doing for continuity is we're just checking for a break in a wire. So this may or may not work in certain situations, but it's this little symbol right here. And I, on this particular multimeter, enjoy hearing a dinging sound when I use it. So if I were to touch right now, you'd probably see something. But if I click here, it'll actually give me a ding for a circuit. So what we can do is we can actually go to these two bolts and check it. So the wire is continuous throughout this circuit. So we know that's good. Sometimes we can check this, although this might not work the same. And essentially what you're doing is you're touching this lead and this lead. So hopefully I can do this. So this is not going to work. So the reason is because this is structured slightly different. This actually has a glass bead. So you could check from here to half of it and then the other half, but you might think there's a failure in between. Generally, this doesn't fail that often. So I'm going to plug it back into where it was. So we know that's not the case. So what I did to troubleshoot this a little further was I changed the actual hot end and extruder with a different one that I thought was known good. And what actually occurred was the error still happened. So at that point I was at a loss thinking that I had a broken board. But that wasn't what the case was. So I had to think about it for a moment. And what I came up with was maybe there's something wrong with the firmware. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to pop this out. We're going to then plug it into here. And then plug this into the computer. I'm going to change the power back to USB power just for this test to load firmware. Although it's getting hard to see. So we'll double check the power. It works. So on the computer, this is what we're going to do. We'll go back over here. We'll go to here. We're actually going to close this. And then we're going to go back to the folder for downloads. So inside downloads, we already have his folder. So we're going to delete our folder. Because at the moment it doesn't matter, it doesn't work. Then I'm going to right click and I'm going to extract all again and just open up a fresh copy. And while that's going on, I'll check on the chat. And it looks like it's kind of quiet in the chat. Let's see. He said the SKR something, I lost the interest as soon as I saw it, was a BTT. This solution actually applies to multiple boards, so it might be of interest to you or may not. So essentially what's going on is this might be an error that happens in multiple places. So by opening up a new file, we're going to confirm that without a modified file, meaning configuration advanced.h and configuration.h, that it works out of the box. So we're going to have to open this. Maybe we can do it this way. Well, I don't have it set up to do that, so we'll do it over here. So I'm going to open this. I'm going to go to my downloads folder, open up the first Marlin folder, second Marlin folder, then select the folder. Inside here, we have to figure out what our board is. We already know what it is, so I'm going to do this kind of quick. So it's source core boards.h. Then I'm going to search on SKR_V2, I believe. Copy the information. So we're just trying to emulate his setup without changing anything else. So we'll go to configuration.h, and we're just going to change two things. The default board and the serial port to -1. That's all we're going to change there. Then we're going to set the platform IO.ini, and there is a default setting for the extruder. This is why I'm doing it. So let me show you that real quick. If you go to thermal settings, I believe it is, you can see down here that it's set to 1 for the first temperature sensor, being your extruder. Your bed is not currently set down in here or anything else. But I thought originally that it might be 8, which is closer to what the sensor may be or may not be. But in this case, I'm sticking with the default just to see what happens. So now that that's set, we'll go over to platformio.ini. We have to reset this again. So we'll go to the ini folder, find our board, which is STM32F4. We'll search on SKR_2, I think. Find the actual chipset down in here. Copy that. Close out of here, go to platformio.ini. Paste it over the Mega 2560, do a clean, and then do a build. And so what we're now doing is just building a default configuration with only the board specified and the serial port. Everything else we've left alone. So what we're trying to determine with this problem is, does it work out of the box from Marlin? If it doesn't, it might be a Marlin issue right then and there. If it does work, then we've got to figure out why it may occur. And that's where it might get a little sketchy as to me being able to solve it, but I'm going to show you certain techniques that might help. So this is almost done. So it just finished. So we'll right click, we'll reveal in File Explorer, we'll double check our last build, and then we'll send it over. And the reason I do that is to make sure that it loads. So if there's two files in here, I know it didn't load because one of them will be cur and the other one will be firmware.bin. That's another thing you can do to troubleshoot. So let's go back over to the desktop and pop out the drive. Drop it back in here. And this time I'm actually going to load it different. I'm actually going to put it on direct power. And I'm going to plug this in, then I'm going to plug in the power. So here we go. You'll hear a ding when it works correctly. Then we'll go back over to Pronterface. Inside Pronterface, we'll connect again. We still have the temperature set to our default, so now we'll try this again by doing a set. So now I hear the actual power supply rev up, so I know it's powering. So that tells me it's actually heating, and then you can see that it's rising here, and it's at temp, or just over temp, but you can see that it's 60 degrees. Actually, it's 88 right now, which is a little scary. So I don't know why it's rising so much. That shouldn't happen. It may actually go back down in a second, but it's super weird. There might be a setting in the background. Either way, it's heating. So we know that's good. This should actually be 60 degrees, but it got a blast of power. So if this tries to continue to heat, there might be something else weird going on. But I'm not too worried about that right now because all we're interested in is that it's heating. Granted, it should be down by this line. So I'm going to turn it off for the moment just because it's going to get hot. And as you can see, this will start to actually degrade in a second for temperature, or should. But let's give that a moment to see what happens. But what we've come to realize is it does work, although it shouldn't work that well. So let's go back over to the desktop for a second, and I'll show you what I thought was occurring. So on the desktop, if you go over here, we've got two different files. So we're going to have to create a compare directory. So I'm going to go new, and I'm going to say compare for the name, and then just press enter. Then I'm going to copy this and paste it into here. And then I'm going to rename these one at a time to user. And the reason I do this is because you can't compare the exact same file name in the exact same directory, but you can do it over multiple directories. But I'm just trying to show you a simple way to do this. So that's the first one. Inside here, we got to get the next one. So we're going to go into the Marlin folder over here, and we're going to copy these two files. Then we're going to go back to download, into compare, and then paste them right here. So now we have two files. So to compare them, what we could do is this. We could start with this file and this file, and right click, and then show Tortoise SVN, which is a free download. Essentially all it's doing is showing us the user config and our config that is vanilla, hopefully. So you can see the name right here and here. Over here you see little yellow marks. Those are differences. So if we click over here, we can see that this person marked off or made notes to themselves saying what this was. So he's saying that this is the first extruder. So he's saying thermal extruder 0. And then he's saying thermal bed over here. So the difference is that this one's not set. So if I were to copy this, I'll show you what goes on if I move this over. Then that line goes away. So technically I can try and do a Control Z to put it back. Next thing, our differences here with steppers. These shouldn't make a difference in this scenario. And then we have down here the direction of what the stepper goes. That shouldn't be a factor. And then we have the bed size. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to close out of here, and we're going to try an experiment. So I'm going to copy the user file right here for configuration, and I'm going to go back over to the downloads. And what this essentially is doing is cutting the problem in half. So I'm going to have to close out of here real quick. Then I can go back over to this folder, to the correct folder, and navigate down there to the Marlin folder and paste it in here. What I'm going to then do is delete this file. I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to rename it to back to what it was called. And then we're going to reopen it, rebuild, and see what happens. So I'm going to go over to the desktop for a moment, turn off the power, let that discharge, make sure there's no lights, and now we can take out the drive. So I'm going to place the drive back in here. So what we're doing is trying to save 50% of the time in this particular case. So let's go over to the desktop. We've renamed the file, so that means we can go over to VS Code. We'll click over here, we'll open the folder, we'll go to our downloads folder, we'll go to Marlin 2.0, Marlin 2.0 select folder. Then what we'll do is a clean and then build. So clean and then build. And I'll check out the chat while that's going on. Okay, so this is going to take a second to actually build. And after it builds, we're going to reload the file yet again. So what this will tell us is that, does the error reside in configuration.h or does it reside in configuration.advanced.h? That's a possibility. So what we are essentially trying to do is replicate the error in half the files that we're using. So this is almost done. So let's double check on it here. And there it is. So we'll reveal in File Explorer. We'll double check to make sure we loaded a file before that. We'll then right click and we'll send it to the D drive. So now we have 2 files again. So now we'll go back over to the workbench. Pop out the drive, plug it back in, and essentially all I'm doing is, it's like what you do in programming. I call it a bubble sort. It's not really a bubble sort, but we're breaking the problem down into halves. So as soon as that actually beeps, which it did, we can go back over to Pronterface. We've got it plugged in, so we're going to connect. We connected fine, so now we're going to click on set the power and see what happens. That part's set, and the power supply is not making a noise to change anything, meaning that it's not heating up, but it could be that it's at temp, because you can see it's right here, so it's starting to rise. So what I can do here is I can increase it a little bit more than what it currently is if it doesn't rise too much, but it is heating. So we're not hearing the revving, but we can see that the temperature is moving. So we know the problem's not there. So we can disconnect. Unfortunately, it got super hot, so it doesn't seem to work as well when I keep it lower temperature. So we wait for the board to power down. So we know the error is not in configuration.h now. So we can disconnect this. And the way we can confirm this is to do the opposite. So we'll place this in here. Place this in the computer. We'll go back over to the desktop on the computer. We'll go to our downloads file folder, and essentially I'm gonna take out the change, but I have to basically delete this, but I can't delete it until I close it. So I have to go over here, close folder, then I can go back over here. And this seems like a lot of work, but it's actually kind of simple. So that's good. I mean, there is a quicker way for me to get to my actual result. So I'll show you that. I can actually use the compare files. Apparently I wasn't thinking about the problem as I was going through it, but we'll give this a second to actually extract, and I can check on the chat while that's going on. That's okay. Nice to see you, Larry. We're talking about how to troubleshoot an issue that has to do with the extruder not functioning correctly, and I'm showing how to break the problem down by half. So essentially the issue was that the extruder didn't heat. So we just proved that it works with his configuration file. So now we're going to try it the other way around, where we try it with the advanced configuration file and see if that causes an issue. So I'm just basically opening up a fresh copy. So inside here we still have our files, so we're going to go into compare and we're going to cheat. We're going to grab the advanced and we're going to grab the configuration.h, which are the 2 different files. Go back to our downloads, go into Marlin, Marlin and then paste. So one of the files is replaced. This one doesn't exist anymore, so we need to rename this one back to that. So essentially we're using our configuration file and his advanced configuration file. So we know that ours will work, but we weren't using it in the last test that we did for configuration advanced. So we're gonna go back over to VS Code. We're gonna open this up. Then we're gonna go to Downloads, Marlin, select folder. We're gonna do a clean and then build, but it's not going to actually build because I have to change the INI real quick here because we have a fresh one. So I'm going to search on SKR_2, find our chipset, copy that, go back over here, paste it. Now we can do the clean again, even though it's not really of value at this point. Then we can do the build. And so essentially what we're going to get out of this is, does the error occur with the advanced configuration file? If it does, then we can do a file compare and see if there's some setting that's causing it, or at least have an idea. But we have an idea of how to actually fix it now, because we broke the problem down into parts or halves. So as soon as this builds, we'll load it. Okay, that's done. So let's go over to .pio, the 429, find the file, right click, reveal in File Explorer. Click on the file again, double check first that it was not a duplicate file in there already, and we'll send that to the USB, double check it's there. Then we'll go back over to the workbench, and hopefully it won't power down on me. And plug this back in. So now that that's plugged in, we'll plug in the USB and then we'll plug in the PSU for 24 volts. It should ding any second. So we'll go back over to Pronterface. Inside, whoop. You know, it'd be great if I followed directions here. Oh, I'll show you what I saw, even though some of you may have seen it already. So essentially, what you're seeing here is it can't upload to the actual file. I accidentally clicked on upload versus build. So it built, but was unable to upload. So no biggie. There is a way to do it, but I'll save that for some other time. So now that we're in Pronterface, we'll connect to the device. And as you can see, the temperature after we connect it is below 60 degrees. So essentially, we're going to set the power and see if it works. So we set the power. There's no change in sound on the PSU. And you notice how it's not moving upwards for the actual temperature. It's actually going down. And then it's about to fail any second now. And it just did. So essentially what that is it's like this part right here doesn't exist. So that's our only clue. So I'm going to disconnect from this. I'm going to power down the board for the moment. And we're going to look at the other half of the file. So if we go over to the desktop, and we go to the downloads folder, we still have the compare folder. So we're going to click on the advanced and the user advanced. And then we're going to use the diff tool in Tortoise SVN by right clicking. and we know where the differences are, so we'll click on the first one. So there's something about the actual fan and the pins that are being used. So what we can do is we could change these values back to what they currently are and then retest it, or we could look around a little bit more. So we have the auto fan right here, and then down here we have one last setting, and that's long file name support. So let's start with the most obvious, which is this. And as you can see, the pin number here is -1, which means that it's unset. Then over here we have PB25. So what is PB25? So let's click over on the actual pinout diagram and try and find it. So PB25 is probably going to be a fan. These are direct power. So then we have fans right here. So it's fan 2, which is right here. So that seems to be what it's having an issue with. Then there's fan 1 over here, and then there's fan 0. So let's try and troubleshoot this first by changing it back to what it once was, and then see if that solves the problem. So if you click over here and you click on these, you can actually send them over to the other place. So that's what we're going to do in this case. So I'm going to use the arrow right here and just copy them across. And that essentially will fix the problem. But seeing how we don't need to do that, well, we do need to do that at the moment just to change this. Or we can do this. We can actually comment out these lines. So I'm going to show you how to do that in the firmware. So we're going to search on use controller fan. And as you can see, it's commented right here and here, but not here. So what we'll do is we'll basically copy that little piece that we have here. We'll go back over to our advanced configuration. And that way we can conserve what we're working with. Sorry, I gotta minimize some of this stuff because it's hard for me to tell where I am. Go to the Marlin folder, then go to advanced configuration, hit Control F, then Control V, then enter, and it brings you to that place. So we'll hit the Control /, and then down here there's a couple of different ways we can deal with this, but essentially this block now is disabled. But we can copy this line and actually paste it again, and then change this to -1. This is in case something's wrong. And then this one we'll just comment out with the Control /. And then technically we don't have to worry about this one because it doesn't have a fan to communicate with. So let's clean and build again. And let me give it a second this time so I don't click on the wrong thing. So now that that's clean, we can do a build. Yeah, you can move from port to port, Battle Bunny, by using the pins file. So if you've got a burned out E0 port, what you're going to do is this. You're going to go to source pins, and then I don't know which board you're working with. I'm guessing that maybe you're working with the SKR2. You'd go over here and find it, and in this case you can see that there's an SKR. Hang on, I gotta find it. I might be on the wrong folder. No, that's gotta be the right place, so I just gotta find it real slow here. That's weird. I probably just scrolled right by it while you guys are screaming it's right there. So here's the actual configuration file, but it points to this one right here being common. Inside of common, you'll see the actual steppers. which are right here. So essentially, you see how it says E0 right here? And you want to use, let's see, is it possible to replug it to Z2 so it can simulate? Yes. So essentially, you can swap the names by changing this to either E1 in this case, because I don't know which board you're on. So you could say this is E1 and then rename this one E0 all the way down. And that'll take care of the issue where the board will think the next stepper over is the actual stepper based on the pins. So you're just swapping file names for this, 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 and this. So anytime you see E0, those are going to be swapped with E1, and E1 is going to be swapped for E0. And that way you'll be using these pins down here. So let me set up the build real quick here. So if we go over to the actual file in .pio, and then we find the firmware, we can right click and reveal in File Explorer. I gotta go pop the drive out while I'm doing this. So let me put this in here and plug this in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to double check again, make sure it loaded the first time. Right click and then do a send to the D drive, make sure it got there. And the reason I'm doing this, for those that don't know, is so that if I see bin in there before I actually copy over, it will throw an error saying that do you want to overwrite. But the reason I'm being obvious is to show you that if this exists, when I pulled it off the actual board and this exists, then this didn't load. So let me take this back over to the board. Pop it in the drive. And then I got to energize the system with PSU power. And then wait for the beep. Then we'll go back over to Pronterface. Inside Pronterface, we'll connect again. It does say the printer is now online. So we're just going to do a set and see what happens. So you can tell that the actual power supply is not revving up. So this is going to fail. So we'll give it a second to fail. This is a very unique error. This is why I'm covering it, because I've never seen this before. Usually it's a thermistor that's loose. So you can see that it killed. So that's good. So what we're going to do is disconnect. Oh, it's not responding, so I'm going to power it off. Give it a second to discharge. Pop out the drive. Place it back in here. And then place this in the computer. And I know this is very iterative, but the point of it is to be iterative so you can find the exact issue. So let's go back over here and let's scan through the files. So we know we didn't change this. I don't think that's the issue. So let's jump to the next set of stuff. So we've got the E0, which is extruder 0, auto fan. Then we have PB3. So what is PB3? So if we go over here and we click on this, we got to look for PB3. So PB3 is this pin right here. So that's odd. So let's think about this for a second. We're saying the auto fan is on HE0 for PB3. And the question is, where do we have our extruder connected? So if we have extruder 0 here and extruder 1 here, what pin does this associate with? So you may have figured out what I'm trying to say. It took me a second to get there to show you it. But what we're going to do is we're going to test our theory. So we're going to go over to the error that we see here, we're going to copy this string right here. And the reason I'm showing you this with a file compare is so that you can find issues quickly, and obviously you can't see what I'm talking about. So let me go back and show you. So over here it said PB3 when I went to the compare for the second set because I skipped over the, hang on, let me get back up to it. Oh, this is the regular compare. So right here, I don't think that was an issue because it's not enabled. I mean, we could change 255, but I don't see any value in it. So I clicked over here. On the default file, it says -1. On the E0 autofan pin, it says PB3. So I go over to the pinout diagram to look at this. You can see right over here that HE0 says PB3. Then HE1 says PB4. So this is your extruder 0. This is the power port. Then you have extruder 1, which is your second extruder. And then you have your fans over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and look at the board and see where E0 is located for the extruder, which is HE0. And this will become obvious. So if you look over on the board now, this is HE0. The pin that we're referring to is one of these two pins right here. So we can tell it's probably the bottom pin, which is the negative pin in this case, according to what I'm seeing here on the actual desktop. So let me go over here. So you can see PB3. And then we're saying PB3 right here. So we're going to search on this string right here inside of VS Code. So inside VS Code, we're going to leave that for a second. We'll do a Control F and then V. And you can see that this is set to PB3. So we'll backspace 3 times. We'll say -1. Then we'll clean. And then we'll build. And we'll see if the error is actually fixed. But the whole point of this actual demonstration for you is to show the thought process behind troubleshooting as quickly as you can. It's not always going to be right away. There might be something obvious. In this case now it looks obvious. But that's the thought process. You find where the things that have changed and either change them back or change them to something else to see what the issue is. So we'll find out if this theory is true in a second. So we'll go back over to that folder in a second. I've just got to fold some of these down. We'll find the actual firmware.bin. We'll right click. And then we'll do Reveal in File Explorer. Double check the drive again. Go back. Right click on this and send it to the drive. Make sure it got there. It did. So we're going to go back over to the workbench. Pop this out. Place this inside of here. And then we're going to power the board up. Wait for the ding. Once we have the ding, we'll go over to Pronterface. Inside Pronterface, we'll connect. We'll verify that we're online right here. So what we're going to have to do is set the power again and see if it works. So I can hear the actual power go up on the actual PSU, and you can see it start to rise. So as you can tell, that was the issue. So I'm going to turn it off because I don't want it to shoot to the moon. And you can see it goes back off, but the temperature maintains for the moment because we blasted a lot of temperature into the heating element, meaning a lot of voltage. So that's why it's probably rising to the moon. So let me go back over to just the desktop for a second. and then quickly say what I've said before. So let me power this down. So in essence, the issue was that we were sensing or using a fan off this port. If we'd used it off the other port for the signal pin, we would have been fine. But the other thing that I want to point out is that down in here, the board's completely de-energized right now. These are your actual fan pins. So it's easy to get confused. Trust me, I've done it. So if we go over to the actual desktop, we can see what those are. Let me just bring it up so you can see. And I'm pointing out the obvious on purpose. So let me take you over there. So here are the fan pins right here. So they're actually PB5, PB6, PB7. If we wanted to go further with this, we would then plug in PB5 inside of Marlin for here by doing PB5, and then we could actually build it again. Let me clean it and build it, and I'll grab the actual drive and we'll see if the error is no longer there. So this is something that you'll have to learn over time. It's more of an art than it is an actual, you don't get it right away, but file compare at least shows you what's different, and then you can break that down. But 99% of computer problems that you have in writing code, this is how you probably sort through the problem, is break it in half. So let's find the file. It's the bin. I'll right click, reveal in File Explorer. I'll double check the drive. Then I'll go back. And a lot of the things I do seem like ticks, in that I do the same thing over and over. The rationale behind that is to see differences or changes. So I know it seems kind of weird, but it's a habit I've gotten into because I've made so many mistakes. So let's go over to the workbench real quick. Pop out the drive. Pop it in here. Now this might be slightly warm, so we might not have the best of read, but we're just checking for the failure now. So I'm going to plug it in. Give it a second to actually come up. Then I'm going to go over to Pronterface. I'm going to connect to the device. As you can see, it's now connected. The temperature currently looks to be 86 degrees. Technically, we don't care about it now, so we're going to click Set. Now, essentially, it's not going to rev up because we're at such a low temperature. So if we were to set this to 150 or maybe 100, let's see what we're at. We're at 83. So if I were to change this to 100 and then click Set, we'd actually see if it works. So the power supply goes up and it heats. So I'm going to turn that off to let it cool. But essentially that was a pin conflict where another pin was using it. And you may be able to see the same issue in here on occasion with the debug setting, where you'll actually get more of a readout. This is why I use Pronterface as a tool to troubleshoot, because it's got some functionality in it for like debugging. So essentially I can turn that back off so we don't get all the messages, but that's why it's so helpful to use that. Let me check on the chat because I've been talking way too long. So let's see what we got here. I've got 2 Octopus Pros and can't get either one to be recognized by any computer, Mac or Windows. I got 2 Octopus Pros, neither one of them is recognized by any computer, Mac or Windows, Pi or Linux. They both load firmware because the SD card shows firmware.cur. That may be true. Scott, if you want to drop your configuration.h into the Discord, I can tell you what the problem probably is right away, and we can all see what the answer is to it. So I'm going to unplug this for a second. I'll give you a second to drop it in Discord. If you know where the Discord is, that's great, but it's also in the description of the actual video, or it's on my channel. So I'll check the general chat and see if it's in there. It's not up yet. So inside of here, well, someone doesn't like connectors, but that's okay. We've got the general chat that I'm looking in. So if you drop that in there, I can actually see what's going on. And somebody figured out their issue. So, Scott, are you still in the chat for the video? I know there's an 8-second delay between me saying that and you hearing it. Okay, well, I can show you what the problem might be. And my guess is it's either a conflict or something else in the actual source. So let me see if you guys can see where I'm seeing. So let me change the view. So essentially, my guess of where your issue is occurring, where it doesn't show up to the computer, is right here. Now this may be defined as one of the other two serial ports. I always do the board as the first one is -1. The other ones cannot use the same number. So my guess is this is why you're seeing that issue. It's set to something like 0. But there are 2 more or 3 more in here. I think they just added another one. There's 2. There's 3. Yeah, there's only 2 more. So this one they always tell you use for the motherboard. I personally don't do it that way. I do it backwards on purpose because I assume everyone has a motherboard. This is the first thing. The second one I use is for the display. And the third one can be used for another device, maybe a Raspberry Pi, but I don't see a point. But essentially, your issue is probably this. So I'll check on the chat and see if you've tried that. So you're trying to get to it. Is it not coming up in the actual video? I can paste one in here. Let me just pull this up real quick. Let's see if I can do it over here. It might not let me. No, not there. And of course I blank on how to do this the moment I need to do it. Of course I can't do it. If someone wants to paste it in the chat, it's going to take me a second to remember where it is. If you can paste it into the chat, that is. Oh, there we go. Create an invite. Okay, so here's the channel. Apparently, whenever I post it on YouTube, YouTube changes the paste and adds characters to it, which makes it not work. So it's usually, there's a hidden character after this in the description. but that should get you to the channel. And essentially everyone usually talks in the general chat, so if you can post it in there, that would be the best place to put it, and we can see if that's the actual issue. So I'll give you a second because I know there's an 8-second delay between me telling you and you hearing it. And that way I can grab something to drink out of the refrigerator. Okay, use the bin file from BTT support sent me. Yeah, BTT is probably not going to give you that the way you would like it. If you have a config file from BTT, I can show you what it is. But they do the LED or their display as the first thing, and they do the board as the second. Probably shouldn't cause an issue, but it might. Or they have a mistake in their bin file. So what you can do is, I actually have a playlist that's probably in the description of this video. If you go and you watch the playlist, it walks you through step by step how to set up your board. So you should be able to solve the problem probably on the very first try. Yeah, I can see you in Discord. I think everybody can. Let me see. Yeah, everyone can see it in Discord right now. About 90% of the people in the actual stream right now are probably in Discord as well. And they're familiar with this issue because I think every single person, including myself, has had this exact same experience. But I just put it back on the actual screen. But essentially, there's a playlist that I have that explains how to set up the board. It applies both to the Octopus and Octopus Pro. The only difference that you'll see on the Octopus Pro is that the actual TFT port is in a different location and there may be some added functionality. But essentially, the configuration thought process is exactly the same. Alright, well, I'm getting a little bit cottonmouth. I might stream tomorrow, but I still need to record a tutorial for this weekend. I've been a little bit busy this week, as some people in the chat know. So I'm going to end early tonight. And anybody that's doing super chats and stuff like that, unfortunately, the way that I see my display, I only see the chat. I don't see super chats. So if you're actually sending stuff over either Patreon or PayPal or anything else like YouTube, I can't see it from here. But thank you if you are. And everyone take care, be safe. If you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. It's probably the best way to get this hellscape over with. And wear a mask until this hospital situation for people that are there gets reduced. And I'll catch up with you later. And thanks very much